Okay, so we're going to reflect on last week's Standard 2, learning differences. So I want to ask how you felt your class went last week, based on the main criteria that was highlighted. So valuing students, differentiated instruction, students with learning differences, multiple perspectives, and ELL, English language learners. So how do you think your class went based on these criteria?
Well, I always value my students. I make eye contact with them. I talk about the lesson with them, not just with them, but also with the TA and the other teachers. So I want us to work together in a group, and I want them to build on their previous knowledge. So I want to help them to build schema. So that's why I have differentiated instruction, which is the next element, to evaluate whether they're ready for the next level, with the checklist and assessment tables. I try to differentiate further for students with special needs. And
how did you try to accommodate all of the children? Did you have any children in the class that have any special learning needs or any disabilities? Were there any children you identified that you had to accommodate more than others, maybe?
I think for last week I wrote down in my lesson plan that I have ADHD and autism or learning disability learners, if I have them, which I don't have them at the moment, I think. Because I've been working with the students for almost 6 months now. So I'm pretty confident that none of them exhibit these characteristics.
Have you spoken with the class teachers at all, or any of the admin staff, to kind of find out if you did have a concern? Have you approached anybody else to find out if there are any students in your class with special learning needs?
I think for the students that I always teach, I would say I always plan for the ELL learners.
Okay.
That's the majority of the students.
Okay.
And that would be considered as students with special learning needs, which is also the same as the fifth element. Because they are ELL students.
Yeah.
Teaching abroad is a little bit different than teaching at home, where you would have the majority of the students speaking English. So I would kind of tie those together. And I did thought about if my students have ADHD, and I spoke to the class teacher and I spoke to admin. None of them submitted any document.
Okay. So you have checked with them, and there's not been any documentation submitted by parents. Okay, but it's good that you highlighted that in your planning, and it's good that you checked. I think it's good that you did find out that none of your children have any specific learning needs. But what you said about the English language learners in their own right, having to think more about your teaching strategy to accommodate the fact that they're learning a second language, that's also reflected in your planning. And I think that's good to recognize that language learning is a different type of need that the children have, and the different abilities within the class in terms of language. You did try and differentiate to accommodate not only the language, but also the different learning styles. And that's something I really liked about your class last week, was you obviously used your prior observations of the children to put them into their groups. So you had the scholars, then you had the designers. So using that prior knowledge of what your children like, if they like drawing, then they can be the designers. If they're more hands-on, then using the iPad and the books as the scholars. That was a really nice idea, and I think that really helped to differentiate the instruction. So I really like that aspect of your class.
I actually learned that from our observation last week, when you mentioned I needed to have more visual aids and more, just more strategies for different learner needs. And interest.
Well, it worked, because what I observed when I went to the scholars table and they had the books and the iPad, I saw Alexander. He was actually reading the numbers in the book. He was actually, and he was using his finger. He was using like the reading conventions, and also Suki as well. She was pretending to read. She was following the words in the book. The book, she wasn't reading the words, but she was kind of making up a story as she went, and she was again using the writing conventions and reading conventions of going left to right, top to bottom, and she was talking with her partner. So these children were really engaged because they were interested, because they had the books and they were allowed to express themselves. So this is really, it really worked well. And the designers as well, they came up with some really interesting ideas about what they would put into their garden. And, so letting the children be a little more free, the differentiation, I think it was a really good idea and well implemented last week, especially looking at their interests. So I think he did really well in terms of differentiating. And I agree totally with you in terms of valuing the students as well. You did listen to the children's perspectives, and I think something maybe you could try and do in the future is to try and let the whole class listen to the children's perspective. So, as good communicators, it's not all about the expressing your feelings or ideas or sharing. You also have to be a little more receptive, and you have to listen. And this is something I think you can try and help to get your children listening to others. Because I did feel sometimes when the children were listening, some children were listening to the other children, others were kind of just doing their own thing. So I think maybe you could reinforce, children as communicators and link that to being principled and responsible learners, and that would help then all of the children who maybe the lower ability children, if they can be listening to others, then they can pick up more. So if they have more opportunity to hear English, especially from their peers, because they'll be more willing to kind of follow their peers, and that's kind of what the lower ability English learners, that's how they kind of learn more English, is they copy, they repeat, they echo what they hear. So if they're listening to the other children in the class, listening to their perspectives, I think that will be a good thing to try and improve in the future. It's a whole class interaction in terms of listening. But you'd had some other really good ideas for valuing students. I like the way how you reflected on the children when they made their choices. Some children, they made the choice of being happy and angry. Now, I like the fact that you addressed that and you kind of reflected on that choice and you respected their choice. You allowed them to say it, but you then explained to them that they could think a little bit more about their choice. And that was really good to see that you reflected as a class. So the children are really starting to think about what they say before they say it. So that was really good. And that's a really nice way of, valuing the student voice and letting everyone, hear what they're saying. What else? I think the incident with Bruce and Andy, could you just talk me through how you approach that situation, and if in the future that happened again, would you do anything different?
So first of all, I was in the middle of the class, and then Bruce raised his hand, and he said that he needs to talk to me. He has a question. That's how I understood it. So I asked him, "What's your question?" Then he came up to me and he said that Andy hit me. I think both in Chinese and a little bit of English. Then I addressed him immediately, and I said that, "What happened?" So I stopped class and I was focusing on Bruce and Andy. And I tried to explain to him that it was not okay to hit. So I made eye contact with Andy to make him understand that this is not what you're expected to do in the class. And it shouldn't be something that should take place in the middle of the class where Bruce and you hit each other and you were having a conflict. I felt like I had to deal with it immediately because it was something serious.
Yeah.
It was to address their physical needs. It's not just the linguistic needs and the cognitive needs,
Exactly.
like we talked about last week. So that's what I did.
Also this week, students with learning differences or needs.
Yeah.
At that point, Bruce obviously felt strongly about what happened, and in that point, he needed somebody, and you were there to offer him the support. What I liked when you addressed the situation is you did address it as a class, because it's a teaching moment, and I think, the whole class did need to be aware that, hitting or, invading personal space is sometimes we're going to react to that. And you gave Andy a choice. You still allowed them to sit together, and you gave them a choice, and you gave them one more chance, which I think was good. But what happened is later on, maybe 5 minutes later, the same incident actually happened again. And Bruce tried to tell you, but you didn't address it the second time. You kind of continued on with the class. Now, it may have been because you were kind of mid-flow, but he did kind of raise his hand and go to say about, Andy was continuing to not hit, but I think kind of invade his personal space. And he wanted to tell you, and he had to kind of tell the other teacher behind. Now, because you gave him a choice, and because you gave them one more chance, you can't. I think at that point, you could have acted. You could have taken action and said, "Okay, I gave you a chance. You haven't been able to sit together," and that may have been a chance either to move one of the children and separate them, or you introduced the star. Your IB star, which was your way of giving positive reinforcement and also praise and reward, and also for addressing negative behavior through taking away elements. So I think at that point, maybe you could have taken stronger action, because you did say to them, "I'll give you one more chance. I've given you a choice." So by not fully addressing it 100%, I think in the future you have to kind of be consistent and have consistency.
Should I talk to the TA, because sometimes I didn't even see it, to be honest.
Okay.
So I didn't know that there's something else that happened. So he turned to one of the TA and talked to them. Maybe the next time when I see something like this happen, I should make eye contact with the TA and signal him or her that if this happens again, can you separate them? I should make it clear that if this happens again, could you please, carry on?
In this, I think that's good for working together. I think because you made that declaration as a class, I think you then have to follow up as a class to say to everyone, this is not appropriate behavior. So it may be that it was an honest mistake, you missed it. But if you do notice something, if you give the children a chance, or you give them a consequence, you have to be consistent. The way that you addressed the first part was really good, and giving them a choice to stay together, not automatically, saying, "Okay, you go over there, sit away from him." You talked about it, and that was really good. Just make sure you're consistent. And also, I really like the idea of the IB star. But you could maybe construct, as well as, you take away the pointers, say, for negative behavior, but you could maybe start with an empty star. And you could maybe highlight more positive behavior. If children are showing the attributes of the learner profile, if they're being good communicators, if they're being principled by raising their hands, then you could maybe reward them and try and give them the incentive. So you could say to them at the very beginning of class, outline your expectations and say, today we want to get whole star. To do that, we need to be communicators. We need to, as a class, be principled, make good choices. And you could then start to pick out more positive behavior rather than focus on deconstructing and taking away the star. Because that in itself is a little more negative. You can maybe think about constructing. But of course you can, if you think the behavior warrants taking away, then of course you can do that. And you can kind of give the children, like you did with Bruce and Andy, choices. Say to them, well, do you think that we are being principled in this moment? And you let them decide, let the children decide, let them reflect. And if they're not being principled, you maybe put it to them and say, okay, so do you think we should put the principled part of the star on the star? Try and get more reflection from the children, let them work out and tell you, communicate to you what they're, why you've had to stop.
Which is kind of something that I tried, and I realized that having that start there is kind of important for them. They realize that if they're not doing well, I take away the start. But again, I should do it more positive, like reinforcement with like adding to the star when they do well.
And also use the star throughout the entire class. You looked at it at the beginning of class, which is great, but then it was kind of just left for a long time. I think if you're going to use that as a way of managing behavior, refer to it, keep going back to it, keep using it, let the children know that it's there and that this is kind of what you're going to use to model positive behavior, but also let them know that if they do something that's wrong, that there will be a consequence. But it's a nice idea. And overall, I think the class went well, and it was much more organised than the previous week. You've obviously spoken with your TAs; they were doing the assessments, and the assessments again were really good because it was differentiated. And I really like the fact that your assessment,
this one, right?
It was differentiated. You had the different levels, which was great. The questions were different for different learners, different abilities, different needs, and I think it worked well.
I think it worked better than week 1.
But that's to be expected. I mean,
it is to be expected.
You're going to develop, and you're going to. You're already starting to use, a lot of the strategies, and you're building. You're building up, and I think you're building in confidence as well.
I do see kids respond to like the content more compared to before, where they're more confused and they're not sure what they're doing. With props, with visual aids, they're definitely more confident in expressing themselves. And like you said, even if they're just reading and looking at the word and trying to figure it out, they're thinking. Like I think the TAs are really helpful. They try their best to monitor their students, and it's just sometimes with a big class, I find it difficult to focus.
I think that's the tricky thing about this class, and they all are English language learners. This is their second language. Some of them it's their third language. So, I think your expectations shouldn't be so high. I think you're already starting to get to know your children. The children who are struggling. The ones who are able to work more independently. And like you showed today, you're beginning to know their interest. So this can really help to inform your planning in the future. And I think like I said, your organisation is getting much better and utilising all of the people and the resources in the classroom. Like today, you used technology, books, drawing. TAs, your teaching assistants were all willing to help and kind of knew what they were doing. So, all in all, it was a good class with a little room for improvement.
Of course, lots of room for improvement, I'm sure. Thank you.